wanted to get started by talking about boundaries and what they are, because there's a lot of ideas about what a boundary might be and might not be. And for me, a boundary is something that arises out of your lived physical experience. A boundary is something that is strengthened by your ability to be in the world, to be able to be open, and also to be give a little bit of space. It's a receptivity, but it's also a discernment. A boundary isn't a wall, it's more of a membrane, and it must be able to open and close when it's appropriate to do so. The very first boundary of all, I believe, is in the feeling of safety. If you don't feel safe in your body, in the world, in your home, it's pretty darn hard to be grounded and to have a fully embodied boundary, to be fully filling your field. It's absolutely sort of a first thing that has to happen. And there are many reasons why you might not have really healthy or well-defined boundaries, but I feel like one of the very first can be ancestral trauma. And I wanted to share my father's story today. This is a picture of him as a little boy. And he was born in Latvia. And he, his mother, and father were all affected very deeply when the Russians invaded. His father was a soldier and died, and he and his mother fled from their land, from their farm, and wound up in Germany and lived for 4 years in a camp. This level of trauma, of losing your home, of losing everything you know, and being chased at the threat of death and war, it lays down a layer of profound trauma and profound injury to the spirit. And I remember many years later when we'd visit my grandmother at her farm, whenever we'd go to leave we were on vacation and we'd have to leave at some point. And I remember her crying and saying, "I'll never see you again." And that level of trauma that lives in her experience for her life, in my father's, as long as he lived, and it lives in me too. And I think that I, along with a lot of people, are being profoundly impacted by the current war, because I'll tell you, it really rattles my bones. I feel my ancestors calling to me saying it's happening again. And what we can do to help heal this wound, this intergenerational wound, is to support ourselves, to recognize that this is a real thing, to recognize that we can do work to help support ourselves, and that a lot of times our sense of lack of safety may very well come from an intergenerational or ancestral trauma. So I want to show you some possibilities for helping to rebuild your field, to help rebuild your strength, and frame it in a Chinese medicine model. I find Chinese medicine to be so beautiful and poetic. It speaks in a symbolic language, and it describes healthy function, both of a physical body, but keep in mind the mind body split never happened in Chinese medicine. So the mind and the body and the spirit are all intertwined and they are one. So when we're talking about health, we're talking about health of the entire system, the whole function. And it's described in a language that talks about the symbolic language of a society. So I might be using terms like the emperor, who is a definition of the heart in the physical body. The heart is an organ system, so it encompasses the actual heart, but it actually is a much wider organ system. And the heart is the guidance of the body. The heart is it's not the brain of the body, but it's the center of your being. And so everything that we do is to be protecting that part, that innermost part of ourselves. So we have what's termed an outer gate and an inner gate. And I'll show you a little image of the Forbidden City to give you a little bit of an idea of that. So we'll be talking about the outer gate, the inner gate. We'll be talking about some essences that will help you be supported in those parts. And at the end, I'll be showing you some acupressure points that you can use to adjunct your use of essences and any other therapies that you might be doing. So this is a Google Maps image of the Forbidden City. And I think it illustrates pretty well this idea of an outer gate and an inner gate. And the entire city was just designed to protect the emperor, to protect the well-being of the realm. Because if the emperor was at peace and calm and clear, then everything else follows from that. And in the microcosm of our own bodies, when our hearts are calm and clear, we can hear the will of heaven and we can direct our lives well, and our bodies work well, and our health is good. So the outer gate, and my little birds are helping me by being in my background. So I'm sure you can hear them. Our outer gate, I mean, this Forbidden City is pretty well protected. We've got moats, we've got walls, and then this outer gate here. And the outer gate protects the exterior of this experience. It keeps hostile forces from coming in. It keeps the emperor from being disturbed by anything that's not okay to be permitted in. So in our outer gate here, and then as it processes into the inner gate, which is the central area where the emperor can receive visitors. And the inner gate is the role of the pericardium. And the pericardium rests around the heart and protects the heart. And the pericardium is considered to be the role of emissary. And the pericardium decides who gets access and who doesn't. So I think this is just kind of a fun way of showing you what this conceptual framework was of the body and the system. So let's talk about the outer gate, the outer boundary. If you are not inhabiting your body, if you're not grounded and solid in your being, your outer boundary is relatively undefended. And you tend to be open to all sorts of influences that you might not want. And for the most part, I'm talking today about emotional influences, sort of energetic influences. A lot of us are sensitive people. And by helping to strengthen your outer boundary, it helps you live in the world a lot more easily. Some of the essences that I use the most for helping to restore the outer boundary are essences from the magnolia family. And these are some of my very dear friends. This is the Yulon magnolia. And I always remember that the magnolias have been around for 100 million years. It's an astonishing length of time to be here on the planet. And what I find is, as essences, they help us to learn this process of incarnation, of bringing our spirits firmly and fully into our bodies and living this experience. Now, as medicine, this Yulon is used for lung issues, which is very interesting because the lung is the home. And we'll be talking about some of the spirits. There's multiple spirits that reside in our body, and these aren't ghost spirits. These are parts of our soul, let's say. They're termed spirits. So the lung spirit is the corporeal soul. And this is, if you think about it, if you stop breathing, you're going to have a very short lifespan. And so having this integration of your lung spirit, being able to inhale and breathe in deeply, allows your spirit to settle into your body and fill your experience. It's also the most permeable layer that you have with the world. Your lungs bring in air and bring in chemistries from scents and flowers and energies all around you. It's a really permeable membrane that you have between you and the world. This essence is really helpful for shock. And one of the things that in the description of Shen injuries or shocks, they talk about the Shen residing in the body, in the physical form, like a flock of birds in the tree. And when there's a shock, such as war, dislocation, um, some sort of really dreadful thing that happens to you, your Shen flies up and out like the birds being flushed from the tree. And our job to help bring back all of your birds, bring your birds back home into the safety of your body. And that's one of the things that this Yulon Magnolia does so very well, is help you bring yourself back into yourself.